This is pretty normal here in Colorado. It doesn't bother us at all. We don't care. But welcome. On behalf of Scott's family, Anahit, and Carter, and Alex, and Donna, and Charles, Scott's parents, and our National Federation of the Blind family, we welcome you to this occasion. I would like to introduce for a word of prayer folks who can and want to stand, those who don't or can't enjoy seating. And I'd like to introduce a longtime leader in the National Federation of the Blind, Mrs. Mary Ellen Jernigan, for a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Although we gather this evening from our many backgrounds, beliefs, and faiths, we come with hearts united in sorrow, and yet with deep gratitude and joy that each of us have had Scott in our lives. We come together to mourn, to comfort, to be comforted, to remember the gifts he showered upon us gratuitously: friendship, wisdom, steadfastness, compassion, confidence, and exuberance, and love, so often bestowed in that signature voice of his. To remember his leadership, a leadership he chose and embraced at the tender age of 18, then carried on his broad shoulders for the rest of his life. To remember the preciousness of life and the responsibilities we now carry in our own time, as Scott did in his. To remember to be seekers of that which is sacred, of what lies outside ourselves, of that comes to us as gift, as grace, as love. To remember that joy honors those who have gone before us. To remember that joy and grief can live together in the same space. Let our prayer tonight be that we let our expression of our joy and our grief comfort and bless each other, that we celebrate Scott as he would want us to celebrate, and that we, as we go our separate ways tomorrow, we let ourselves hear the words of the poet Christina Rossetti come to our ears as if from that familiar booming voice we knew so well. Remember me when I am gone away, gone far away into the silent land. Yet, if you should forget me for a while, and afterwards remember, do not grieve. Better that you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad. Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Jernigan. Mary Ellen Jernigan, one of 4 brilliant and kind and generous first ladies we've had in the National Federation of the Blind, and we say she's blind at heart as well as being a thought leader, as you could tell from those words. Let's see, Scott wanted to remind everybody, get on the PAC plan, sign up today. We need your contributions right away. That's what it says right here, just want you to know. You didn't think, my friends, no, I'm not going to get too far into this thing without asking for a donation for something. That's what Scott would want us to do, cry a couple of tears and then bring out the checkbooks. I'd like to next recognize, we elected this gentleman to be our president of the National Federation of the Blind in 2014, and he has served with distinction and grace and humility and at times genius, and I mean that sincerely. Please welcome the president of the National Federation of the Blind, Mark Riccobono.
Thank you, Kevin. It's an honor to be here, and I should, to add a little color, say that we made certain sacrifices in having the honor to be speaking this afternoon. I know many of you would have loved to, especially for me. I think it's Scott's last laugh, as this lifelong Green Bay Packers fan stands here with a Minnesota Vikings scarf on, as our other speakers also share that honor. And I should publicly disclose I have not yet to the LaBar family that I do in fact still owe the estate of Scott C. LaBar a substantial winnings from football and baseball games that we had bets on last year. So yeah, this is the last time you'll get photographic evidence like this, so now's your shot. We gather together to celebrate a great man, a father, a friend, a leader, a mentor, a trailblazer, and a blessing to us. It is said that a great man is one who leaves others at a loss after he is gone. Scott LaBar transcends that level of greatness. While as individuals, we will continue to feel lost without his physical presence, he has left us with each other, a community that can continue working together to spread the spirit and values that this man shared with each of us. Scott was challenged by going blind at age 10, but he did not accept the popular message that blindness defined him. He recognized he could change the future. To quote one of Scott's favorite artists, Bono, pop music often tells you everything is okay, while rock music tells you that it's not okay, but you can change it. Scott always had a greater affinity for rock music, and the world is better for it. Despite the incredible program of speakers we have here today, we will only begin to reveal the many dimensions of this great man, his impact, and the spirit he generously shared with us. We must continue to share and celebrate his story, using Scott's example as motivation in our march together. In 1986, the National Federation of the Blind made an investment in an 18-year-old assertive Minnesotan by awarding him one of our prestigious national scholarships. That moment was the beginning of Scott's transformation into a generous, savvy, and unwavering leader of the organized blind movement, whose impact circled the globe and affected a diverse set of communities. For nearly 40 years, Scott volunteered thousands of hours as a mentor, advocate, elected leader, committee chair, fundraiser, skilled counselor, and dogged negotiator. In addition to his extraordinary volunteer efforts, he dedicated his private legal practice to the advancement of disability rights. As a blind lawyer, his practice was particularly effective in advancing opportunities for the blind. And most recently, he served as the Federation's General Counsel, helping to coordinate the most significant legal program impacting blind people anywhere in the world. He used any opportunity he had to build the organized blind movement. His extraordinary efforts in the implementation of the Marrakesh Treaty, his successful recruitment of hundreds of people with disabilities into the American Bar Association community, and his intersecting work with other organizations will all be shared by others on this program. He was rarely quiet when doing that work. His booming voice was readily identifiable in any crowd, but he did the work with humility, not seeking personal recognition, and always preferring to celebrate the effectiveness of collective action. Yet, he will always be most loved for the softer things he did. Spending hours listening to the stories of blind people, teaching students at the Colorado Center for the Blind, and helping people make connections with others in pursuit of their individual dreams. Our organization will forever be different because Scott LaBarre was a leader in it. It will also not be the same without him going forward. Scott's legacy urges us to go forward, and fortunately, we have hundreds of members that Scott personally mentored to build on that legacy. We have already taken the first steps in recognition of the hope, love, and determination that Scott poured into our movement, and in acknowledgement of the outstanding impact of his leadership, the Federation's Board of Directors has established the Scott C. LaBarre Leadership and Justice Fund. But more personally, let me share my experience with Scott's big heart. He was the older brother that I never had. We had a standing meeting every Tuesday morning, and although it was not in our written notes, we always had an agenda item to check in on our families. His love for Anahit, Alex, and Carter was unending. Fortunate for me, the LaBarre children are older than my own, and his dad feedback has been invaluable. Scott was not afraid of being genuine with his friends, and I will continue to treasure those moments. Our recent times together have largely been shared over Zoom from our respective homes. Scott made certain that his voice was very present in the virtual room. He bought the best microphone he could find. The moments I liked best were those when the smallest LaBarre needed his attention. We would be talking about some serious matter, and he would ask if I could give him a minute or two. When he left his mic open, I could hear his big, booming voice raising a number of octaves as he joyfully called, "Mocha!" to go outside. This always involved Scott giving her a lot of love before he returned to our work. I love the contrast of our outstanding general counsel joyfully sharing love with his dog. It expresses so simply the heart that drove everything he did. It was more than sharing in his love for the Labar family. He was also part of mine. In a visit to our home in Baltimore, we could be having a very serious conversation on the rooftop deck, but when one of our girls inserted themselves into the mix, Scott stopped everything to engage with them. He would play along with whatever silly scheme they had in mind. They especially seemed to like the idea of pretending to jail the lawyer. They started referring to him as Scott the Dot, and he loved it. Scott was the reason that I always made sure to have gin and tonic in my house. One time I asked my daughter Oriana, who is here today, to ask Scott the Dot if he wanted another gin and tonic. Perhaps due to the carbonation in tonic water, she cheerfully went to him and said, "Would you like another glass of gas?" We have been enjoying glasses of gas together ever since, although we have expanded the definition to include any beverage that is chosen for the occasion of sharing our hopes, fears, joys, or sorrows. I am certain that in the Riccobono house, we will forever offer each other glasses of gas in salute to the man who offered us the spirit of his heart every time we met. And I invite you to share in that tradition. On behalf of the members of the National Federation of the Blind, I want to thank the Labar family for sharing Scott with us. We know that it is because of your generosity, sacrifice, and support of Scott that this community has had the opportunity to connect with each other. It is your love that was reflected in Scott and continues to be shared in this community, a group that will continue to be here for you. A number of times in the final hours of his life, Scott said to Anahit, "Don't let them forget about disability rights." We will not forget. And more importantly, we will continue the mission. Let's adopt a new rally call to that effort in Scott's honor as we move forward together. To take the lyrics from a U2 song, "One love, one blood, one life, you got to do what you should. One life with each other, sisters, brothers. One life, but we're not the same. We get to carry each other. Carry each other. One powerful life that has bound us together was Scott C. Labar. One life full of love, and we come together to share both the love and the mission of making the world better. One community built by the life achievements of one great man. Let's celebrate that life by carrying each other as we continue building the future that Scott imagined. Thank you all for being here.
Well, now you see why I introduced this special man like I did. He's quite a speaker, quite a leader, and with a heart as big as Scott's, in my opinion. This is hard for the little brother. See, Scott was my older brother. See, I know I'm 13 years older than he is, but those of you who know me know that, I mean, I was the little brother, okay? I just, you know, it's Mom always liked Scott best. I mean, let's just, those of you who remember the Smothers Brothers, you will know that it's hard for me to hear all this great stuff about Scott, because, you know, if he were here, I would be saying, come on, I don't. Oh, it's such an honor now for me to introduce the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Colorado and a dear friend of our National Federation of the Blind. Julie Deedon's in the front row here with the Executive Director of the Colorado Center for the Blind. And Lieutenant Governor Primavera has words to share from herself as well as from the Governor Polis. Lieutenant Governor?
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, first of all, I'd like to offer my condolences to Scott's family. I am the Lieutenant Governor for the state of Colorado, and so please don't tell any of the Denver Broncos that I have on a Minnesota Vikings scarf today. But it's my honor to be here today to remember Scott LaBar, who I had the opportunity to work with on a number of issues impacting Coloradoans who are blind in my time, both as a state legislator and the Lieutenant Governor. In fact, the last time I was with Scott was at a bill signing at Craig Hospital, and I did my best to try and convince him that one day he should run for the Senate himself. Scott was a fierce advocate, but understood the process and politics of achieving lasting change. Because of Scott's work, people who are blind are better able to get the skills needed to secure good-paying careers. Coloradoans with disabilities can vote securely and privately from their own homes. And Colorado government websites and documents are rapidly being made more accessible. So now I would like to read a proclamation from the Governor of Colorado. Whereas, through his work with the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado, the National Federation of the Blind, the Colorado Center for the Blind, and the American Bar Association, Scott LaBar was recognized as a staunch advocate, a defender of equal rights for the blind and people with disabilities, and a leader in the disability rights movement in Colorado, the nation, and around the world. And whereas Scott LaBar, himself blind, was an accomplished attorney who devoted his legal career to defending the rights of the blind and people with other disabilities, and whereas in addition to his legal practice, Scott LaBar served as a leader in the legal community, working on committees and the Board of Governors of the American Bar Association, serving as president of the National Association of Blind Lawyers, and playing an influential role in numerous meetings of the renowned Jacobus ten Broek Law Symposium. And whereas Scott LaBar engaged in national and international efforts which culminated in the development and promulgation of the Marrakesh Treaty, an international agreement for books for the blind and print, disabled to be shared between countries around the world, including the United States of America. And whereas Scott LaBar was a key player in the passage of numerous pieces of legislation in Colorado to further equal rights for the blind and other people with disabilities, not the least of which was House Bill 18-1104, a bill to end discrimination against parents with disabilities by Colorado County Departments of Human Services. And whereas in addition to all of the other work he performed on behalf of the blind and others with disabilities, Scott LaBar provided mentoring to hundreds of Coloradoans who are blind or have other disabilities and many others around the country. And whereas Scott LaBar's untimely passing on December 10th, 2022 is a loss to everyone in Colorado, the United States of America, and beyond. Therefore, I, Jared Polis, Governor of the state of Colorado, do hereby proclaim January 21st, 2023 as Scott LaBar Day in the state of Colorado, given under my hand in the executive seal of the state. And it's signed by Governor Jared Polis. Scott changed the system for the better now and for the future. He was a father, husband, and friend to many, including me personally, and I will miss Scott, as I know all of you will. So now I'll turn it over to, after I've given 3 Braille copies of the proclamation to Kevin, and I now have a signed print copy for you as well, Kevin.
Thank you.
And now I'll turn it over to Julie Deeden, I guess, from the Colorado Center for the Blind.
You can do that. Thank you very much. Diane? Oh, this is, Scott Labar has a day. Isn't that awesome? That is awesome. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. I don't even have a joke for that. I don't, Julie?
Yeah.
Julie Deeden is here. You know what? The executive director of the Colorado Center for the Blind ought to maybe, you know, Scott was the chair of our board of directors. So why don't we hand the proclamation to you? Maybe we'll
Well,
get
thank
this one.
you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
It's such an honor to have this proclamation, and thank you very, very much, Lieutenant Governor, for being here today. I just want to mention that I've known Diane Primavera for many years as we worked together at the Colorado Division of Vocational Rehabilitation for several years. I'm going to throw my cane down here so I can read. Here it goes. January 21, 2023. Dear Scott, thoughtfulness, and love. I am so glad that you moved to Colorado almost 30 years ago. I feel like we grew up together. Even with all of the traveling that you did throughout the year, you were always attending every chapter meeting that you possibly could. You were called upon to give the state report, and I would give the CCB report. You usually went first. I would stand behind you, ready to push my way in, because I knew we were getting short on time. You would get more and more animated and excited, talking all about the things we were doing in the National Federation of the Blind. But I always had to fight to get my time too. I enjoyed serving with you on the scholarship committee for several years. One of my favorite things was traveling with you to and from Baltimore. As we traveled through the airport, you would tell me which direction we were going in and easily find our gate. Once on the plane, you'd settle down and listen to the air traffic controllers. I learned about the configuration of the runways, jet streams, and so much more. Flying home early Sunday mornings on 2 different occasions, I remember hearing about Alex's baseball games and about all the things that Carter was doing. In 2005, you became the president of the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado, planning conventions, working on chapter building, and going to the state capitol was always so much fun. I cannot express what your leadership and mentorship has meant to me and the center. In 2009, 3 of our students were hit by a car as they waited at a bus stop to come to the center. One of our students was killed. You saw this on the news and called me immediately to say that the press would be calling and coming to the center. You put together a news release and counseled me about how to work with the press. You checked in with me and with all of us repeatedly to make sure we were okay. In March of 2020, we made the decision to send most of our students home. Pandemic time, we worked on COVID safety so that we could reopen the center in person that June. In the past 2 years, with your guidance and care, we've established new policies and protocols to ensure that we handle all situations effectively at the center. I treasure the many times that we have strategized and dreamed about the future. You never set limits and always push the envelope to do more. In October, we worked together to hire a consultant to develop our new strategic plan for the center. I pledge to continue to build the NFB and our Colorado Center. We won't forget to sign up on the PAC plan. I know how proud you have always been of Anahit, Alex, and Carter. I want to tell you that we love them and that they will always be a part of our NFB family, and we are here for them always. So many times I called you for counsel and advice. I know I will still often think about picking up the phone and just giving you a call. I close with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. Many people will walk in and out of your life, but only true friends will leave footprints on your heart. Thank you.
And we know how many people you have inspired over your career as one of our leaders. Julie, thank you for your work. We appreciate it. Everybody keeps talking about how they grew up with Scott. See, you guys all grew up with Scott. I have failed to grow up yet. So, Scott, I'm still a work in progress, I think. At any rate, okay, I want to introduce another very, very special lady to us in Colorado. She is the executive director of the Cross Disability Coalition. And I sometimes say that wrong, Julie, so you'll have to correct me. Please welcome a dear friend of Scott's and a dear friend of all of ours. Please welcome Julie Riskin. Julie, did we? I don't know if she- does she? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm really honored to be here. I don't remember the first time I met Scott, but I remember the impression, and surprise, surprise, it was his voice. It was so confident, and it just oozed assurance that so many of us with disabilities have to fight to get or don't have at all. His presence in the room just permeated victory in a way that was so contagious that losing just wasn't going to be an option. We were going to win. And even if we didn't win, there was no time for self-pity or group pity. It was just about let's re-strategize and figure out how we're going to win, later, and keeping our eyes on the prize of inclusion. I was lucky enough to work with Scott on many bills, some of which were mentioned by our Lieutenant Governor. But I've also been honored to watch him litigate a case. I was honored to be able to lobby with him in D.C. We were both there in the Colorado section of the American Bar Association Lobby Week. I was there to lobby for civil legal aid money, which of course he totally supported, and he was there on the Marrakesh Treaty, and I was thrilled to learn about that. And of course, Scott was the only one in the group that could find his way around D.C. or around the winding halls of Congress, because none of us sighted people could figure that out. I'll always be grateful how Scott and the rest of the Federation and Center, Julie, Kevin, Dan, others, welcome and work so well with the broader disability community. I don't think that happens in every state, and I'm really proud of how we are not siloed in Colorado and that we can work together without watering down the important disability-specific issues. The work of the NFB and CCB, to me, are the model of disability empowerment. Like everyone else, I relied on Scott professionally, and it's been jarring the past few weeks to be ready to forward Scott a bill that says, well, okay, what are we going to do about this, or what do you think about this, and then realize that he's not there. But I know that he worked so hard to build such a strong organization, and that there's so many other people that we really look forward to working with more closely. On a personal level, I think what Scott gave me is something more important. Years ago, Scott invited me both to tour the center as well as to NFB conventions. And what I saw there was a strong, incredible organization that sustained over decades and produced many thriving and proud people with disabilities. I've always said that NFB is what I want CCDC to be when we grow up. Of course, we're 33, so maybe it's time to move out of the basement, but NFB is an organization and the center that we hold in so much esteem. Of course, the NFB conventions is the only large event that I ever attend or have ever attended where I don't get bumped into constantly. I use a wheelchair that weighs over 350 pounds, but for some reason sighted people can never quite see me. But when I'm with a bunch of blind people, it's never a problem. But Scott opening up my world to this community has really been priceless and really helped with my own visioning. So I don't want to think about doing advocacy work without Scott, but life is not about what we want. And the best way I know to honor Scott's legacy is to work harder and smarter, and with that confidence that he always exuded, to use the laws that he helped create and to continue fighting discrimination. And I know that everyone here is committed to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We love you. You're awesome. Thank you. She's pretty special, I can tell you that. Hold on, let me see if I can fix this. I am very technologically savvy. Got a lot of blind people around here, I notice. A lot of lawyers. I'll try to refrain from blind jokes and lawyer jokes. But wait to the reception. You know, it's we'll be good. I want to introduce Senator Jessie Danielson, who worked so closely with Scott on several bills, and she'll tell you a lot about them, or some. But the one that just really has moved many of us is the work that Julie Riskin did and that Senator Danielson did, and that we all did with regard to our right to parent, which has been in question many times throughout the world. And so one of the best people you'll ever find in the Colorado General Assembly, and just a real wonderful human being. Please welcome Colorado Senator Jessie Danielson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today and participate. I'm a little emotional, so just bear with me. I had so much fun at these events. I got to tell you, in my line of work, when you're asked to go to meetings and conferences and convenings, I guess is what we call them now, you don't really anticipate like kind of crass jokes and like some alcohol and, you know, just the first time I'm sitting there and I'm listening and I'm just blushing, you know, like going red, and I thought, you know, okay, this is my crowd. These are my people. And a lot of that I just attribute to the folks who have addressed the group today already, and some who won't are not on the you know, agenda, but who I value very dearly. So I just wanted to say a few words. Thanks again for inviting me. That in and of itself is a real honor for me, because I hold you all and I held Scott in a very, very high regard, on a pedestal way up high. So to be asked here means a lot to me personally. I'm sorry, just give me a second. Kevin's right. We worked on a number of bills, voting rights for people with disabilities, and then probably most notably House Bill 181104, and I'm wearing my button. For those of you who remember the red buttons that we developed, with the image of a family with one person in a wheelchair, one person with a cane, and a small child. And so the name of House Bill 181104 is preserving family rights for people with disabilities. Parents with disabilities, I should say. So Scott approached me about running this bill, and I immediately said yes. And they took the time to invest in me to help me understand what problems blind people face, other people with disabilities face, and the discrimination that they face when they are either trying to become a parent or a custody battle of some sorts, adopting, et cetera, you name it. And of course, the state of Colorado doesn't make it any easier simply because you happen to have a disability, which is something I found disgraceful, agreed to work on, and we did pass the bill together. But I will tell you from my perspective, it was the day in and day out was with Scott LaBar, who was sitting because he was an incredible legal mind, a fierce advocate. He was so courageous. He was fearless. And you're right, that booming voice, I will tell you, if anyone could command the respect that this issue and your community deserve, it was immediately because Scott could command the room. And yes, he knew it, and he knew how to use it, which again just showed how intelligent and talented he was. I was telling the Lieutenant Governor when I saw her today that I was thinking about her because the first time I met Scott was in one of her interim committees. She had an interim committee on the enterprise program, and that was my first introduction on the severe unemployment that blind Coloradans face when compared to basically everybody else. And I didn't fully understand what I was coming into, and I will tell you that Scott pointed that out fairly quickly. and you know what? He should have. He should have. And I took it very seriously. But on the other side of that, he invested in me. And because of that investment, I too figured out what my office should do to properly serve blind Coloradans and other people with disabilities all across the state. And when he called me blind at heart, I know what that meant. I'm not part of the community, I understand that. But I feel very, very close to it because you welcomed me. You all welcomed me in a way that is unique in my line of work. But in turn, I am fiercely committed to carrying on this work, you see? And that kind of welcoming, it didn't just stop with me. One time you gave me a nice award. I came to the conference laughing the whole time, of course. And he brought a gift from my daughter to make sure that she knew about Braille and how this came to be. And you know what she does? She's 5. She was 2, I think, at the time. It's a special thing for me. So I don't mean to talk about me. I'm just saying that this imprint will be ongoing. And so for all of you, I offer my condolences because I feel like while he was incredibly important to my work and that together we accomplished really significant things, and we would not have without NFB and without him in particular, just like without so many of you that I worked with. But really, truly, he was responsible for shifting things as far as the Colorado statute is concerned forever, for the better of the state total, and also specifically for people with disabilities and blind Coloradans. He did that. I felt that we had a close friendship, and I will cherish that forever. But I can only offer you all my condolences because I realized that you knew him much better than I did, and I deeply regret that I didn't know him better. We'll be honoring Scott on the floor of the Senate during the session this year. So I would invite you to join me when I do that. It certainly would be fitting to have you all there in the gallery and on the Senate floor where I can recognize you, his family, etc., whoever would like to come, so that we can mark this incredible man and his incredible life and the legacy that he leaves behind, as far as I'm concerned, in the legislature. But like I was saying on a personal note, I will forever cherish the work that we did, and there are a few key bills that I passed in my career that I look back and I thought we could never accomplish that in my tenure. I thought I was lucky enough to work on something like that I would do something to lead into something else. You know, those things that we did together, but personally, he meant so much to me. And rest assured, if that's what he was saying to his family in December, I will never, ever forget the fight for disability rights. And I will make sure that my colleagues in the House and Senate don't forget it either. Thank you so very much.
Senator, thank you very much, and we know how much Scott dearly, dearly cared about you. He talked about you a lot. You were the one that taught us the term nothing burger, because there were people that tried to shove this non-bill of a bill, and you would say, no, Scott, no, we're not, and you and Scott would chair these meetings, and I would sit there going, man, they just know how to talk truth to power. And so, and you would say, Scott, is this okay? We're not gonna have a nothing burger. And we didn't, so thank you very much. And by the way, what would Scott do right now? Oh, by the way, we have a couple pieces of legislation that we would like to speak with you about, accessible prescription labels. We've got some trouble with the transportation network companies, and the Business Enterprise Program needs another look-see. So we'll be talking with you. Oh my goodness, another lawyer coming up next. Oh my God, I better keep my remarks short. Alan Olson is a 30-year friend of Scott and practiced law with Scott and worked with Scott, and I've heard him tell some stories about Scott that we won't repeat here until we get to the, glasses of gas later. We probably talk about him. Ladies, please welcome Alan Olson.
A lot of those stories were forged over glasses of gas. I referred to him affectionately as Scotty, and he called me A.O. Usually musically, using those dulcet tones that were uniquely his. I would hear him summon me from across the room. Ayo. Ayo. That was his wonderful personality that we all were so fortunate to get to experience. It's what made him unique. I didn't know it at the time, but the Saturday before the Saturday that Scott passed away, it's going to be the last time I got to ever talk with him. I was so fortunate to get to visit with him for almost 2.5 hours. And I tried to remember what Mom taught me early about having one mouth and 2 ears. And for once, I had the good sense to follow her advice, and I just listened. Saturdays tended to be his Superman day and his regimen of drugs, and so he was boisterous and full of energy, and he was Scotty. And some of the things I want to share with you tonight are some of the things that he wanted me to share. And I'm going to just kind of weave them in. But there's been talk about growing up together. I grew up with Scott LaBar in the American Bar Association, with so many of our friends that are here in person and watching virtually. He was like a brother. We loved him. Whether we were working cases together, brainstorming as co-counsel, for example, on Aaron Cannon's case, what a privilege it was to represent Aaron Cannon. I want to just share one story with you about that. As many of you know, Scott handled the oral argument before the Iowa Supreme Court in that case, a case that you're all very familiar with and has made such a meaningful and lasting difference since the Iowa Supreme Court had the courage to do what it did. The Iowa Supreme Court each year chooses some cases, and I used to call them the roadshow cases. They take them out into the community. The idea was, let's get out into the community in Iowa, throughout Iowa, so that the community can see firsthand how the justice system works, as evidenced by its highest court. And our case was chosen for that. And we were down in southeast Iowa in an unusually large auditorium in a junior high school. And one of the neat aspects of these road shows was after the oral arguments, which were just as real as if they had been held where they're normally held. The idea was to get together in the cafeteria, in this instance, for punch and cookies and to really turn it more informal so that the community could meet the court and get to visit with them and ask questions of them. But it will come as no surprise to any of you that after Scott delivered an extraordinary oral argument to the Iowa Supreme Court, there was a break before we and as we transitioned to the cafeteria. And what do you suppose happened? Normally, folks start lining up to meet the justices of the Iowa Supreme Court. But on this cold evening, the Iowa Supreme Court lined up to meet Scotty. And then when they got done meeting Scotty, all the folks that normally line up to meet the Iowa Supreme Court justices lined up to meet Scotty. It was extraordinary. Many of you know the nature of that case. It was a case about Aaron, who had been invited to join a chiropractic school, and then about halfway through was told that they couldn't accommodate the rest of the education because it was more clinical. And I only share that because after an inordinate amount of time in that cafeteria, where people pored over the extraordinaire that was Scott Charles LaBar, we were a couple of the last folks to walk out of that junior high school, long after most folks that came to watch and learn about our justice system had exited. But I'll never forget when I opened that door and we began to exit, there were all those people waiting for Scotty to come out so they could clap for him and for his cause. And I'll never forget the first voice I heard when I emerged from those doors said, and I quote, "I hope you kick their ass." But whether we were working on cases, whether we were snowmobiling together on different snowmobiles through the national forest, whether we were being certified together at the Land Rover driving school. And yes, Anna Heat has the proof that Scotty is certified driver. Or more recently, celebrating Scotty's 50th birthday together at a U2 concert in Madison Square Garden. Here's what I know about my friend, whom I loved and I miss. Scott LaBar may have lost his eyesight at age 10, but oh, did he have vision. Vision for his family, vision for his friends and clients, vision for his legal profession and community, and vision for a movement that is now international in scope. Through his vision, Scott touched each of us in a unique and most special way. But because of Scott's vision, in our mind's eye, we all can see more clearly. We can see how our vision is the justification for our existence. We can see how we can better navigate the challenges of the realities of this side of heaven. And we can see how our own leadership is about making others better through our example, so the impact of our presence transcends our absence. How? Just like he did. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. And if we do, like Scott, the meaningful, lasting, and positive difference in the real lives of people will be seen by others. And what Scott understood was what others see depends on what we show them. May Scott's vision, his goodness, continue to inspire our own, so the positive impact we make is seen far and wide and throughout time. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful, brother. That was wonderful. That was wonderful, man. That was wonderful. That's why you're one of the first people that we called, Alan, when we were putting this program together, because we knew how close Scott felt about you and the words you would bring. How you all doing? Everybody okay? Everybody all right? Everybody good? Everybody need to stand up a minute? Everybody good? We're gonna welcome some Zoom people. Hi, Zoom people. We welcome you. Okay, next item. We're going to introduce now, and we're ready to do this, Curtis? We're all seamless here, we think. Mary Ann Diamond worked closely with Scott on the Marrakesh Treaty. She's the past president of World Blind Union, represented pretty much represented the diplomatic corps that worked on the Marrakesh Treaty with Scott. So over Zoom from, where are you? Are you in Australia or somewhere? From down under, I think, is Mary Ann Diamond.
Thank you, Kevin, and good evening, everyone. It's an honour to be asked to speak tonight, and I am sorry I could not be there in person, but Melbourne, Australia is a long way, and it's very hot here at the moment. I recall meeting Scott for the first time when he joined the World Blind Union Marrakesh Treaty negotiating team. Over many years, we had worked with publishers to improve the situation of accessible books for blind and print-disabled people around the world with little success. In 2008, the WBU decided to change our approach and began working with copyright experts and friendly governments over a 5-year period at the World Intellectual Property Organisation, WIPO, to achieve a treaty. It was adopted in Marrakesh, June 2013. It is hard not to remember meeting Scott for the first time. That loud, booming voice, enthusiasm, great skill, and obvious hard work ethic were immediately apparent. Scott brought his legal experience and expertise to our team, built good relationships with the US government negotiators, and of course, his personal desire for all blind people worldwide to be able to exercise our human right in accessing information. Throughout the 5 years, there were many difficult conversations and situations, even during the diplomatic conference. There was huge pressure from publishers and from some governments for us to weaken the treaty text, even accept voluntary guidelines. But we stayed firm and we stayed strong. Scott was great company. There are many examples of adventures we shared when travelling and working together. One that comes to mind is at the end of one day at a WIPO meeting in Geneva, I assured Scott that I could find our way back to the hotel without waiting for a sighted person to accompany us. We walked to the tram, then from the tram into the hotel without any difficulty. Scott was impressed and he suggested I could make a good NFB member. Well, I was impressed with his endorsement as we headed to the bar for our usual G&T at the end of the day. Following the adoption of the treaty, Scott continued to work hard. Our focus moved to getting countries to ratify the treaty. And it is fair to say that Scott played a leadership role in the US to achieve ratification. I recognised that this was very difficult, but Scott and the team were successful. Scott then continued to work at the international level as the World Blind Union representative on the WIPO Accessible Book Consortium, where he was a great contributor, representing the interests of blind and print-disabled people worldwide. Scott was a friend, a colleague, someone I admired. I was honoured in 2018 when Scott and I were both presented with the Lighthouse for the Blind San Francisco Christopher Buckley the Blind Boss Award for our contributions to the Marrakesh Treaty. With all Scott's achievements within the US and at the international level, he was first and foremost a family member. He loved his family, spoke about them often, and was so proud of them. He enjoyed his work, but was always keen to get home. Annahid, on behalf of all of us who worked with Scott at the international level, I say thank you. And my thoughts and prayers are with you and your family at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Scott was always talking about you, by the way. He always said so many kind things. And so thank you very much for that. Also, let's take a moment and thank one of Scott's very best friends, who is working the sound over there for us, is Curtis Chong, who Curtis always says Scott was the son that Peggy and Curtis never had. And he was very close. And I tried to get Curtis to say a few words, especially the stories about Curtis and Peggy and Scott and a number of folks when the Valley Fair Amusement Park, this is way back, this is 30-some years ago. Scott was still sort of finding his legs and his wheels and figuring it out, but it didn't take him too long because when Valley Fair Amusement Park said blind people couldn't ride rides unless they were seated by sighted people, our crowd said, I don't think so. And Scott was the first one to jump over the barricade and get on the ride. And no surprise that after about 45 minutes, Scott and Curtis rode. So another one of those great stories. It's got a nickname for me too, Kevly. I was Kevly. He was Scottley. I was Kevly. And some people in this room will know we'd walk into this big ballroom and we were always together, you know, if we were around each other, and you'd hear Scott way off, Kevly, and I'd be going, Scottley. It was just, that's how we found each other. So it was a wonderful, now we have another, just a wonderful memory that I decided to share. I have so many, like many of you do. Francis Gurry is the former director of the General World Intellectual Property Organization. I never knew that was the title. Scott always just said, I got to work with my friends at WIPO. So here he is to talk a little about Scott, also by Zoom.
Dear family of Scott LaBar, dear Mark Riccobono, dear friends, it's a privilege for me to have the opportunity to say a few words to honour and to celebrate the life of a great person, Scott LaBar. I came to know Scott in my capacity as Director General of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, a post from which I retired in September 2020. During my time as Director General, the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired or otherwise print disabled was successfully concluded in 2013 in, of course, Marrakesh. The Marrakesh Treaty is the most successful example of a multilateral treaty concluded in the 140-year history of the World Intellectual Property Organization and its predecessors, success being measured in terms of the speed of take-up around the world and the number of ratifications to the treaty. Scott LaBarre, there are now over 91 contracting parties and over 100 countries covered by those contracting parties. Scott LaBarre was an eloquent, persuasive, effective advocate for a better deal for visually impaired persons. And his influence resounded not just in the formal meetings where his formal skills as an advocate were apparent, but also in the innumerable informal meetings that he had seeking to persuade those who were not necessarily convinced of the need for the treaty to convince them of the fundamental justice of bringing a successful conclusion to the Marrakesh Treaty. We also formed at WIPO the Accessible Books Consortium, and that is a partnership of all of the elements involved in the value chain of book publishing, and together with the World Blind Union and other stakeholders from the visually impaired community. I'm very pleased to say that the Accessible Books Consortium has, through its various elements, brought together a library of some 720,000 works, published works, in 80 languages, available throughout the world. Scott sat on the board of advisors, the board of directors of the Accessible Books Consortium. He was, as always, a highly skilled, highly knowledgeable, and sound and solid negotiator and advisor to all. Scott, your contribution to a better world, a world which recognises and gives expression to the fundamental rights of visually impaired persons, was immense. You were a quiet but immensely strong and effective hero. Farewell, Scott. You remain in our hearts.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you for being here. I want you to know that, like Alan mentioned earlier, about 3 weeks before Scott left us, I was able to spend about 4 hours with Scott, and he and I went through all the hills and valleys, and he gave me directions, because at the time he was fighting, and we knew it was a struggle, and he knew. He was very, very aware. But one of the professional people that he mentioned that he really admires was you, Francis. So thank you very much for doing that. He thought a great deal of you. We're so serious because, but you know, Scott wasn't always, this mature, magnetic. I mean, come on. I mean, before he met the love of his life, Anna Heat, he sold his wild oats. And there was a time when he was at my house, he was not too happy with the girlfriend he had at the time. He was so mad at her, he put his fist through the wall of my house. Still owes me $255.97. One of Scott's esteemed colleagues and a wonderful brother is a brother in our movement, and he's joining us by Zoom as well. Another lawyer, folks, another lawyer. Please welcome over Zoom Daniel Goldstein, who's a founding partner with Brown, Goldstein, and Levy out of Baltimore. Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you, Kevin, or I should say Kevly. I apologize for not being with you in person. I'm in France where it's well past midnight. Wishing I was there, very much wishing I was there with all of you. It was wonderful to have Scott LaBarre as your friend. When you ran into him, his smile and hearty laugh could shake you from any mood you might be in, and if you were already in a good mood, he just lifted you higher. But then you needed to have your feet planted squarely, because he would begin to express his enthusiasm of the moment. And it would pick you up and carry you along as though you were surfing a tidal wave. Warm, generous, open, all of these characteristics were constants with Scott and made you look forward to being with him as often as possible. You never had to guess with Scott. His honesty and candor came without calculation and without calculation of the cost to him. It's just who he was. I know I'm on the agenda to talk about Scott as a lawyer, but the qualities that made him a lawyer of the highest order were his personal qualities. Unusually, there was no separation between Scott the person and Scott the professional. I mentioned earlier Scott's enthusiasm. His passion did not wane in the face of obstacles and setbacks, because it was coupled with a persistence and determination that ensured that Scott would persevere for that client, no matter how great, sometimes overwhelming, were the odds against success. Scott took many ADA job discrimination cases, and I need to explain to you that without question, those are the hardest cases at which to succeed. Many lawyers shy away from ADA job discrimination cases, not wanting to tackle cases where bias and stereotypes can triumph over truth and justice. But Scott embraced those clients, he embraced their cases, and he gave each one absolutely everything he had. And everything he had was a lot. Whether he won or lost or settled, every day Scott did something to repair the world. And there are few who can say what we say of him. The world is a better place because Scott LaBarre was on this earth, and his legacy leaves us direction on where to go from here. Judges and juries, like the rest of us, could trust and like Scott, because justice was true in his interchanges outside the courtroom. With Scott, what you saw was what you got. And what you saw was a straightforward, thoughtful, smart, and humble man. Let me say something about the humility, because it is a very rare characteristic in trial lawyers. Not claiming that quality for myself, folks. Scott knew he had a good mind, I'm sure, and he certainly was aware he had a commanding voice. But he also was always aware that there were limits to his knowledge. There was no arrogance to Scott. And the judges and juries, just as with the rest of us, I think there can be no more endearing quality, except perhaps Scott's kindness and gentleness. Does it come through that I not only admired and respected Scott, but I loved him dearly? When I would encounter Scott, be it at NFB headquarters or a conference, he would wait for me to ask after Anahit, Alexander, and Carter, But that was the end of his hesitation. Over the next 15 minutes at least, his love for his family, how proud he was of them, just shone out of him. And somehow you ended up feeling embraced too. His family's love was the source of his strength. His family was his joy. It seems to me that approaching lawyering as Scott did, with such openness and such a determination to seek justice, doesn't just take great strength and bravery, which he most certainly had, but it also requires a belief that the world can be fair if we work hard to make it so. At times like this, at least for me, the idea of fairness seems absurd, like some kind of horrible bad joke. But if I wish to honor Scott's memory, and I do, I owe it to Scott and his family to kindle that belief in fairness in myself and work hard to make it a reality. My life is richer for having had Scott as a friend. He called me a mentor, but the truth is, he taught me lessons of great value. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Daniel, I want you to know that, Dan, that in that last few hours that I visited with Scott before his passing, he also just said wonderful, of course, wonderful things about you. And it was just moving for me. Also, we've talked about the family, and I want to say before I forget to Alex and Carter how much all of you, how much we love you so very much. And we know your dad is gone now, but we're here for you forever. Okay, just know that. Just know it. Okay, this is great. I want more lawyers. I want to, that's all we have on here, lawyers and blind people. You would think Scott was a blind lawyer. Let's welcome, please, Judy Martinez. She's the past president of the American Bar Association.
Thank you so very much. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today. There are those lawyers whom the American Bar Association changes. And then there are a few who changed the American Bar Association. And Scott LaBar was one of the latter. Scott not only made us think differently about disability rights and individual dignity, but he made us think smarter on so many levels, on so many fronts. My friendship with Scott began many years ago when I was first enveloped in his hearty and contagious laughter and his irreproachable humor. There was no dueling with Scott on the wit front. We all know that. He met his victims more than halfway, coming and going. There was no one safe from the warmth of his teasing or the genuinely sweet way, and I know Scott would scoff at that description. But he was genuinely sweet, yet strategic in how he made you want to be his friend. The descriptors that I often think about when I think about Scott as a leader are representative, visionary, statesperson, public servant. Scott was a lawyer servant, the kind of member of the legal profession that the preamble of the American Bar Association's Model Rules of Professional Conduct speaks to and urges each of us lawyers to be. In that regard, Scott understood probably more than most that, as the preamble states, lawyers play a vital role in the preservation of society. And it goes on to say, as public citizen, a lawyer should seek improvement of the law, access to the legal system, the administration of justice, and the quality of service rendered by the legal profession. All lawyers should devote professional time and resources and use civic influence to ensure equal access to our system of justice for all those who, because of economic or social barriers, cannot afford or secure adequate legal counsel. And devote, Scott did. I was privileged to observe the depth of Scott's devotion when, in the same year, we served as presidents of 2 national bar associations, the ABA, and Scott as president of the National Association of Blind Lawyers. It was around that table with all the other National Bar Association presidents that I came to understand that Scott's service was rooted the same as the service of the most effective lawyer leaders. His service always had been and always was rooted in doing good for others and the greater good, and was never about himself. Scott was a lawyer's lawyer, a leader's leader, whether it was his service on the ABA Board of Governors or its executive committee, as chair of the ABA Commission on Disability Rights, or most recently as chair of the Solo Small Firm and General Practice Division, his very bar year. Scott made a difference in his wise counsel, his tough decision-making, and his collaborative approach. But likely his greatest professional impact within the ABA was his service, and perhaps better said, his courage, as he walked to the well of the ABA House of Delegates on more than one occasion and educated his over 600 delegate colleagues as to what a society that sets its values on the cornerstone of equality really must demand of its people and government in everyday life. The delegates listened, and the House as a body adopted the policies that Scott brought to us for consideration. Scott made a home in the ABA, but then he did something else. He invited so many other leaders to join him there. And for that, the ABA will be always richer for them. As current ABA president, Deborah Enix Ross noted in the ABA Journal recently upon Scott's passing, Scott was a top lawyer in the disability law arena, but he was so much more. It is the so much more that is what each of us will remember when we think of Scott in days and weeks and months to come. The so much more that Anahit and Carter and Craig and Deborah and Mr. and Mrs. Labar can best understand. The so much more that made each of our individual journeys all the richer for having had Scott in our lives. We will miss him in the American Bar Association. We know you also will. And we just hope that we will all live up to everything that Scott believed in, what he worked for, and what he lived each day of his life in promise and in purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your being here, and I know Scott would have really, really enjoyed your remarks. Wow, my friend Scott did all that? It's hard to believe. Wow. Also, there are a number of blind lawyers in the house, and I can't recognize everyone, but I was just thinking a dear friend, Noel Nightingale is here, also a blind lawyer, and Tim Elder's here, and Patty Chang is here, and I was thinking about Patty because, as you know, Scott didn't let any passion that he felt go on without work, and he, in recent times, had started knuckling me around about the museum. So if you guys read anything in the program or anything about the Museum of Blind People movement, That's another thing that we're working on, and it's a thing that Scott, over the last couple of months, had started getting real passionate about, probably because his colleague Patty Chang said, get passionate about it. He was a team player. There's Patty over there. You don't miss that laugh. It's almost like Scott's, you know, a little higher. Okay, let's, well, it's just robust like Scott. Doesn't sound like Scott. Thank you. I had to get robust in. Scott used to tease me all the time. Your favorite word is robust. I said, well, it's a good word. And he was robust. Now we're going to have some fun. We have, if Scott were here, Scott would introduce this next presentation of music by saying, dog. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Stray Dog.
There are places I'll remember all my life, though some have changed, some for better, not for better. Some have gone and some remain. All these places have their moments with lovers and friends. I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I've loved them all. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one compares with you, and these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before, I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. In my life, I love you more.
Love it. Love it. When Eric agreed to, and Ann, and I don't know who's playing bass tonight with you guys. Oh, okay. Thank you, Joe. Thanks. When they agreed to do this, well, I didn't have to be talked into it. They were happy to do it. But I wanted them to do a different song, one of Scott's favorite. It's an original composition by them, and it's called Dump That Chump. But maybe they'll do that one later. We might find that later. Oh my, everybody all right? I have to do this laughy stuff because I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to be bawling here if I'm not really careful. He was my brother. And now a special treat for me to introduce the director of the Louisiana Center for the Blind, one of our 3 great NFB training centers, and we have the executive director of our Blind Inc. program here, as well as you heard Julie Deaton of our Colorado Center for the Blind. These are truly, truly innovative places to teach and inspire, and so we want to have the director of the Louisiana Center for the Blind in Ruston, and she's also the first vice president of the National Federation of the Blind, one of my favorite people on the planet, Pam Allen.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It is so humbling to be here today to share with you as we come together to celebrate the impact Scott had and continues to have on each of us. When I first connected with the National Federation of the Blind, I was in college, and I was so eager to meet other blind students. I had so many questions, and I was also excited about networking with others and learning about their careers and the strategies they use to be successful. I had the incredible experience of helping with organizing student chapters in several states and attending Washington Seminar even before my first national convention. And when I found what we then called the Student Division, I knew immediately I had found what I was looking for. And an integral piece of that was Scott. As all of us know, Scott had a way of making an impression. When you walked into a room, even if you didn't know who he was, you knew where he was. His booming voice, his easy laugh, his ability to chime in on just about any topic with some knowledge or usually just his opinion. He had a way of drawing people in and making everyone feel needed. Scott was so great at delegating, and I remember that he found ways for me, who was very new to the National Federation of the Blind, to get involved and feel that I had something to contribute. And I know that he did that for so many people here in this room and people who are listening. Later that year at my first national convention, I was elected to serve on the Student Division Board and had the chance over the next couple of years to continue to learn from and work with Scott. Whether it was helping with more student chapter organizing in different states, or planning seminars featuring the Young and the Skillless skits, or writing up articles for the student slate, or staying up late to count poker chips after Monte Carlo nights to determine the big winner, or having a lively discussion about some philosophical issue at a student gathering, or debating about what was the best U2 song, or all of us dreaming about what our futures would hold. Scott was always at the center of our discussions, challenging us to do more than we thought we could, entertaining us with his adventures and stories, and showing us, by his example, how to lead with wisdom, integrity, humor, and most of all, love. He always made sure we got our work done and that we had fun while we were doing it. Scott found creative ways to share the message of the National Federation of the Blind, and he had a way of getting everyone around him excited about our work. Like I know he did with so many of you, by placing his trust in me, Scott helped me gain confidence and find my voice and my place as a young student leader. And that changed my life in so many ways. In the years since our student days, I had the true blessing and gift of Scott's friendship. We celebrated many of life's milestones as we both completed our education, traveled our career paths, found our soulmates, served in various leadership roles. We enjoyed so many happy times, faced challenges and losses, and shared so many stories, for Scott loved nothing more than to tell stories, most especially about Alex and Carter. Scott was so multifaceted, as comfortable testifying about legislation or arguing a case, talking about his beloved sports teams, or singing karaoke. Throughout all these many years, Scott remained steady, always a constant source of wisdom, a listening ear, a guiding force, an encourager. I knew that I could always pick up the phone or send a text, and I would get a response, a fresh perspective, a way of looking at the situation that brought clarity. Several times during this last month, I have started to pick up the phone before realizing I cannot hear that booming voice on the other end or Mocha's happy hello. It is then that I remember how much Scott loved each of us, and how he fought for the rights of all blind people, and how he cherished the work of the National Federation of the Blind. And though I am sad, I am filled with hope and so much gratitude for being able to draw upon the wisdom he shared and the example he set. Maya Angelou said, "A great soul serves everyone, all of the time. A great soul never dies. It brings us together again and again, just like he did while he was with us. I know that Scott will continue to bring us together again and again, to support each other, to be here for Anna Heat and Alex and Carter, to build the Federation, to keep fighting the fight, and to keep the world with hope and love and laughter and possibility." Thank you.
We are indeed blessed with great leaders, aren't we? Pam, thank you very, very much. Pam is the best. And you know, when I was mentioned Julie Deaton, Colorado Center for the Blind, Pam Allen, Louisiana, and Blind Inc., I think I forgot to mention Jennifer Kennedy, who's also here from Blind Inc., and we appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to introduce one of my very best friends in just a minute, but I'm thinking, one time my wife Bridget and I went to pick Scott up at the airport. Some of you know I lost Bridget, my dear wife, only about 16 months ago, so this has been a pretty tough year and a half for me. But we went to pick Scott up at the airport, and we were standing up where you can see down when people are coming off the train. And I said, "Bridget, do you see him yet?" And she said, "No, but people are jumping to the left and jumping to the right, so I think he's on his way." And he was. He loved Dr. Tenbrook's speech, "The right to live in the world," that's for sure. The next speaker is the immediate past president of the National Federation of the Blind. Held that office longer than anyone, I think 38 years he served us as our president. One of my all-time favorites, Mrs. Maurer, is here as well. Here is Dr. Mark Maurer.
So
That's not Dr. Maurer.
we all know that Scott loved a good microphone, and our sound team is now telling us that we need to trade these microphones out. So
I was going to say, that is not Mark Maurer's voice. Now, here we go. Now, Dr. Maurer.
I want to thank Anahit Labar and Alex and Carter and Scott's parents and the rest of the family for letting me come. And I want to thank Mark Riccobono and Julie Deaton and my good buddy Kevin Worley for inviting me to speak. Scott Labar was first and always a friend. He had many talents. He was physically fit. He could pick up barbells weighing more than 60 pounds in each hand and do with them whatever he wanted. He loved music, and he explored many different genres. He traveled throughout the United States to inspire others and to represent his clients, and he visited many other parts of the world for the same reasons. His memory was prodigious, and he had an excellent grasp of the law. He had a commanding voice and a talent for oratory. He was a joyful human being and a fierce negotiator. His grasp of politics was thorough, and he used his comprehension of the topic to influence policy in Colorado, the United States, and beyond our borders. Along with all of these talents, he had a warm and generous spirit. He was a friend. He wanted to help. He gave of himself to do exactly that. And on those rare occasions when he could not achieve his objectives, he felt personal and profound pain. The majority of human beings think of medical matter. And certainly when the process of losing vision is underway, it is important to seek medical attention to prevent the loss of vision. However, when blindness has come to a human being, and no medical attention will change this, blindness is no longer medical, but entirely something else. Those who become blind have talent, but often this is not recognized. Consequently, blind people are routinely prevented from full participation in the activities that other people take for granted. Scott LaBarre got the challenging assignment to change the comprehension of the legal community with respect to blindness and disability. People with disabilities have a right to full participation in society, but the judges rarely know this. Many lawyers do not know about the talents of people who have disabilities. The topic has never been considered seriously in their lives. This is not astonishing because the notion that blind people are without ability is fairly well entrenched in the thought processes of American culture. Judges rarely encounter people with disabilities. Scott was assigned the task to change this. He served as part of the American Bar Association, at least in part, to bring the reality of disability to lawyers, to help lawyers comprehend that people with disabilities have talent and the right to use that talent. He represented clients in court who possessed disabilities. If judges haven't met competent people with disabilities, how can they escape the prejudice? Furthermore, how can judges know if the lawyers don't? Teach the lawyers, and the judges will know. In the case of employment, the law says that an employee may not be denied employment if that employee possesses the bona fide occupational qualifications to do the work. Even if the person does possess these qualifications, an employer may deny employment if it can demonstrate a safety threat. The assertion of danger alone is not enough. There must be evidence showing that something really is dangerous, not just a claim that somebody is worried that it could be. Well over 90% of employment cases brought on behalf of disabled workers are lost. Consequently, any lawyer who brings an employment case faces an enormous challenge. In 2011, the National Federation of the Blind sponsored a case of discrimination On behalf of a blind employee, Frank Horn, who had been fired by his employer, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railways, because they said he was blind and his blindness created a danger in the workplace. Scott LaBar did the legal work. After a trial that lasted 7 days, the case was lost. In the Court of Appeals, the case was lost once again. The evidence in the case showed that Frank Horn had been working for Burlington Northern doing maintenance repairs on locomotives for 7 years. He had an excellent safety record on the job. He did his work well and in a timely manner. When the company discovered that he was blind, they fired him. No evidence came out at trial that his safety record was poor, that he had been injured on the job, that anybody else had been injured on the job because of him, or that his performance had created the likelihood of injury on the job. However, 3 doctors who had never observed this employee doing his work testified that it is unsafe for a blind person to do it, and the jury believed the doctors. When it came to the Court of Appeals, the judge who wrote the opinion said, a reasonable jury could find that Horn's vision impairment precluded him not only from performing the essential functions safely, but from performing them at all. Blindness alone could be cited, according to this court, as a valid challenge to employment, at least employment working to repair locomotives. It is fair to presume that the judges who heard this case know relatively little about repairing locomotives, less about blindness, and nothing at all about how blind people repair locomotives. The same is undoubtedly true of the jury. The members of the jury know about doctors, and much of the time they trust them. However, although the doctors know something about diseases of the eye, they know nothing about blindness and the talents of blind people. This is not their area of knowledge and expertise. The conclusion is inescapable. The decision in the trial court rested not on evidence, but on prejudice. Scott LaBar managed this case, and he felt the loss deeply. He knew that the decision was not based on evidence. He knew that the medical model did not apply, but that the judge had made him participate in a case which was based upon the wrong standard. However, he also knew that the enormous challenge to eliminate prejudice from the minds of the witnesses, the judge, and the jury must be accepted. A case involving a blind employee is, for many judges, a once-in-a-lifetime experience. If we refuse to increase this number for the judges, they will never come to have the depth of experience that gives them adequate background to make decisions fairly based upon the evidence presented. Scott LaBar also had his joyful cases. Aaron Cannon is a blind person who was accepted for matriculation at the Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa. After Aaron Cannon had paid his money, had participated in classes, and had succeeded in meeting school requirements, the Palmer College officials told him he wasn't really qualified. They said he did not have sufficient sense of vision, and they threw him out. After negotiations failed, we brought an administrative complaint which proceeded through many layers of decision-making, but in 2010 we won. Palmer appealed to court, and a judge decided that no blind person can become a chiropractor. The evidence presented that blind people all over the nation are doing this job made no difference to the judge. We proceeded to the Iowa Supreme Court. The decision of the Supreme Court filled more than 40 pages. Some of the language of the decision is on point. It contains a review of state and federal law regarding discrimination involving disability. However, the dissenting opinions exhibit some of the most obtuse, obnoxious, and prejudicial comments ever written about blindness. Scott LaBarre served as our champion. 5 of the 7 judges on the court declared that discrimination against the blind in colleges in the state of Iowa will not be tolerated. Aaron Cannon can go to school. Furthermore, he was awarded damages for the injuries he suffered. The reports of the case tell us that Scott LaBarre's performance was stellar. Then there was the Marrakesh Treaty. Blind people have been battling to get access to books for as long as anybody can remember. The World Blind Union, which includes blind people from the United States, suggested that a treaty be created to permit sharing of accessible reading matter for the blind across country borders, but organizations representing copyright holders objected. Senior officials in the Obama administration told members of the National Federation of the Blind that a treaty could not be adopted. Treaties, they said, take forever. Even if they are adopted by some kind of international diplomatic conference, it is virtually impossible to get them through the Senate. They wanted us to accept what they called a soft law approach, but we decided to seek full recognition under international law. Scott LaBarre was our negotiator. The diplomatic conference to address the rights and the questions of a treaty to permit written materials to be shared across country borders occurred in Marrakesh, Morocco in 2013. The plan was that the meeting would take place in June. I was then serving as president of the National Federation of the Blind, and the convention of the organization was to take place in early July. Scott LaBarre told me to hold a place on the convention agenda to discuss the treaty. I asked him if he was sure there would be one, to which he responded, certainly. When he arrived in Marrakesh, there were 37 unsolved problems facing adoption of the treaty. In less than 2 weeks, Scott and his colleagues had persuaded the delegates to accept language solving all 37. Within a few years, the treaty came before the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate. At the hearing that occurred, the chairman of the committee said that in a most unusual occurrence in Washington, there was unanimity among the committee members regarding the adoption of the treaty, and it was sent forward to the Senate floor for ratification. Scott LaBarre served on the Accessible Books Consortium, which has made 730,000 books available to the blind to date, which would not have been without his magnificent work. Scott LaBarre's work to improve lives for human beings was enormous. All that he did could not have been accomplished without his robust personality. He was a friend. He wanted to give to others. He cared profoundly, deeply. I enjoyed the interplay of his thoughts, the intricacy of his mind, his insatiable curiosity. But I loved his heart and his indomitable spirit. I am joyful that he was my friend.
Yeah, you did. Oh my goodness. I saw Dr. Maurer at the restaurant today. I said, well, how long is your speech first, sir? And he said, well, you know, maybe 11, 12, 15 minutes. And I'm like, well, sir, I have to keep this thing on pace. He said, well, you want to cut it? And I'm like, no, I don't want to cut it. You know, why would anybody want to cut that, right? That was just amazing, amazing. We're moving toward the end. There's still some wonderful stuff about Scott to go, but I don't want to forget to mention Lisa Bonderson, who was handling the logistics for all of this, and she is, yeah, Lisa, Lisa worked for Scott for a while, and she said some of this stuff is even true that we're saying out here. But she'll continue to work for the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado. She'll be doing it under the direction of the president of NFBCO, Jessica Beecham. Diane McGeorge selected Scott and recommended to the membership some 15 years ago or so that we elect Scott. It was a no-brainer. We elected him. Scott Labar suggested to the membership that he was wanting to turn the operation of our organization in Colorado over to a younger, vibrant, witty, energetic person. I knew that excluded me. And so we elected a year ago, we elected this dynamic and wonderful president, Jessica Beecham.
So I'm not a Colorado native, as you may be able to hear by my voice. I moved to Colorado a little over 10 years ago now to work for the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado, but I almost made a mistake and didn't take that opportunity. I had received a job offer, and I told from Scott, and I told him that I needed to take a couple days to think about it. I went home and I discussed it with my partner, Kevin Kovacs, who's rolling around the room here. And we had decided, you know, that it was a wonderful opportunity, but it just wasn't the right opportunity for us at the time. So I answered Scott's call the next day, and I was explaining this to him, and then he used his magic lawyering powers to persuade me that I wasn't giving him the appropriate answer. So I went home and told Kevin that we were moving to Colorado. And it's a good thing that he's very flexible. He didn't mind at all, and it's been a tremendous life choice for us. We've spent several wonderful occasions right here in this very room together as the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado affiliate. Last year, we were gathered in October, and we were having the change in leadership from Scott to myself, and his running joke for the weekend was, "It's Jessica's problem." But I was so willing and eager to accept that problem because of Scott's tremendous leadership. He had such a steady hand. He had such a calm and consistent personality. He taught us how to have fun and bring joy to the work that we did. And he has cultivated a community of blind people who are truly able to live the lives that we want. So we wanted to make an audio presentation for you all today that would share some of the voices, because obviously we have a lot of voices that we've heard already, but we don't have time to hear everybody's voice who loved Scott. But we wanted to share some of the voices from our National Federation of the Blind community of Colorado community and from our NFB community at large, to just show our love and appreciation for our hero, Scott. And so I'm going to have Curtis roll that audio for you all now.
In loving memory of Scott C. LaBar, Scott addresses the 2022 convention of the National Federation of the Blind of Colorado.
Quite frankly, what I think about life is that one of the main purposes of being here on this rock that we call Earth is to live your life with inspiration and motivation towards a greater cause and purpose. To find some way to leave life and leave this planet and leave our humanity a little bit better.
Scott found many ways to make this world a better place. Here are just a few examples of his extraordinary impact as an advocate. Suzanne.
When I went blind, they instantly fired me. Scott LaBar fought for me, and we won. Because of Scott, my daughter can attain her dream of being a doctor.
Sarah Meyer.
I'm grateful for Scott's advocacy to help ensure that communications from Indiana's Division of Family Resources would be accessible, and for how he was ready to advocate when I wasn't receiving the proper accommodations to take an important licensing exam. But more than anything, I'm grateful for how Scott truly believed in me over the years.
James Gashel discusses Scott's involvement in the passage of the Marrakesh Treaty.
The Intellectual Property Organization of the United Nations was considering a treaty that would make the U.S. law international. Scott led our efforts in making that happen. So now the blind of the world are able to benefit from having ready access to published works and hopefully getting rid of the book famine. And Scott LaBar is principally responsible for that.
Maureen Neatfeld.
When David and I found out that we were going to have a baby, we were so scared. David being a totally blind person, myself being totally blind, and having multiple disabilities, we were terrified that Logan could be taken away from us. Scott led the initiative in Colorado to protect the rights of blind parents. And just weeks before we had Logan, the bill was passed, and Colorado has some of the strongest legislation protecting the rights of blind parents. And that's because of Scott's amazing leadership.
HB 211110 bill signing.
Governor Polis, we want to thank you on behalf of all the citizens with disabilities here in Colorado. Thank you. It is almost Independence Day in our country, but today is another more important Independence Day because we are guaranteeing the rights of people with disabilities here in Colorado. And you have done something that is the first ever in the United States where we have mandated at a state level that all websites should be accessible to all people, including those with disabilities.
Scott shaped the future with his mentorship. Cody Bear wrote, I always appreciated that from the time I met Scott, he had confidence in me to be a leader in the organization, even when I lacked the confidence in myself. I remember at the first NFBCO day at the Capitol, he assigned me to be a group leader, and I had no idea as to what I was supposed to do. Upon letting him know this, he gave me a 30-second explanation of the day at the Capitol and what I needed to do, and reassured me that I would do well. Ronza Othman.
I met Scott for the first time at an NFB national convention, and instantly he took me under his wing. He served as my mentor and, more importantly, my friend. I am a better lawyer, a better litigator, a better analyst, and certainly more ethical and client-focused because of Scott and his advice and his mentorship.
Everett Bacon.
Scott LaBar got involved with me as my attorney and introduced me to the National Federation of the Blind, the wonderful people, all of the wonderful speeches, conventions, hope, love, determination, all of that Scott represented and was able to demonstrate to me and make me want to be a part of this wonderful organization. Scott was instrumental at my first Washington seminar. He showed me around, introduced me to Jim Gashel, Kevin Worley, and others. Even came to my second convention as president and talked to me about contracts, gave me tips on organizing and hosting a convention.
Kira Sweeney.
Scott was definitely one of my mentors. He was one of the first people that I asked for advice when I decided I wanted to apply to law school. And I remember thinking at the time, he's really busy. Is he gonna have time to talk to me? And he did, and he made me feel that the conversation we were having was so important to him. And the last time I saw him, we were at the National Association of Blind Lawyers meeting, and when he found out I was there, he was immediately so welcoming. At the reception, he made sure that I was talking with everyone at the table and I was included in the conversation. And I remember telling him that I was about to be taking the bar exam that month, and he was so encouraging, telling me that I would pass, and I did end up passing, and his support was part of that.
Wayne Marshall.
Under the leadership of Scott LaBar, I had the great opportunity to serve as a chapter developer, chapter president, and as an affiliate board member. Also under Scott's advocacy and leadership, I was afforded the opportunity to obtain skills that continue to serve me and others personally, professionally, and within the Federation. Thanks, Scott.
Renee Anderson.
I remember when Scott asked me to speak at state convention. It was just a special moment that he shared with wanting to know more about me. So anyone that would ever meet Scott, he believed in them. He was interested in them and wanted to learn about everyone.
Scott served as a great example of how to work hard, have fun, and share joy with others. Pam Allen.
One of my favorite memories I have of Scott singing Love Shack karaoke.
I got me a Chrysler that seats about 20. So come on, honey, and bring your jukebox money.
Love Shack is a little place where we can get together. Love Shack, baby.
One of my favorite things about Scott is whenever he greeted me, he would say, Ronza! And it was with such enthusiasm and such joy.
Scott would say, bartender, this glass has a hole in it. And sure enough, get a refill.
Kat Botner says that when she thinks of Scott LaBar, she thinks of the pack plan and the 3 cute little pack critters.
That affiliate will win the pack rat. And you know what? Hey boy, stay there. Get back. Okay, hold on. Come on. All right. I have right here, for those of you who are burdened with sight and all that, here's the pack rat on camera. It's going after the microphone. It's really hungry. This is Ryan the pack rat.
Serena Kuko says that she will always remember Scott's entertaining and educational role in the mock trial.
I'm pleased to welcome you to our very first annual mock trial.
Marianne Migarelli.
My favorite memory of Scott is when he was playing with my guide dog Uno and talking about his dog Mocha. There was such a great change from the serious Scott to the completely silly Scott.
Anahit LaBar.
Scott was just so happy to become a dad, and he was kind of a crazy dad. We had this big tent in the middle of our living room, and so he would get into the tent with Alex, and they would roll all over the house in this tent, making all kinds of funny noises, and they would chase each other, and he really enjoyed that.
We will be forever grateful for the many ways that Scott LaBar impacted our lives and made this world a better place. Melody Roan shares a quote from Mr. Rogers.
If you could only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, how important you can be to the people you may never even dream of. There is something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person.
Jody Whithouse.
Thank you so much for being such a great leader for all these years for our state affiliate.
Brenda Moosby writes that Scott was brave, authentic, loving, and he believed in the potential of blind people. Gary Wonder wrote, when called to serve, some say, I'm a student and have no time to lead. I'm employed and have no time to serve. I'm a litigator and have no time for office. Funding the movement falls to someone else. But Scott's actions and words clearly said, for all of this and so much more, I am here. Eric Woods.
Scott, 25 years ago, I met you. I know I have no right to call you my best friend, but you are truly one of my dearest friends.
Patty Chang.
We appreciate you. Thank you for all you have done. Love you much.
Mark Riccobono, President, National Federation of the Blind.
When I think of Scott LaBar, I think of service. And really to serve in the way that Scott LaBar has takes heart and love and kindness.
Lisa Bonderson.
Thank you so much for the opportunity you provided and for opening doors that I never knew existed. Because of you, I too am living the life I want.
Logan Neatveld.
Scott, I love you and we'll miss you forever.
Carter LaBar.
I love you so much and I always will.
Alex LaBar.
I love you so much, Dad. Thank you for everything.
Love all of you. I miss you, but we got a lot of work to do. And I'm now going to sign off and let you get to that work. With hope, love, and determination, let's make this a better world.
Thank you, Kevin Kovacs and Jessica Picha for putting that together. Wonderful piece. Thank you. Anahit, I'd like you to come up if you want and say a few words. I think there was something else I was supposed to do here, but I know there was. But I would just say to Scott, you know, Achtung Baby was really a good record. I know you didn't think it was a great record. I thought it was a great, Achtung Baby was a great record. I really, Anahit, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we love this woman so much. Scott's wonderful wife, Anahit LaBar.
Okay, usually I need to lower the microphone and I am, usually people grow, I go in the opposite direction. So every year the microphone has to go more and more down. I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you to everyone who's here, to everyone who is present in person, to everyone who is present virtually, and to everyone who is present in spirit. We really appreciate it. I just want to say special thanks to the Colorado Center for the Blind and the National Federation of the Blind for the incredible job they have done putting this event together to honor Scott and to honor his memory and to celebrate the life that he lived, the accomplishments that he's had, along with everyone who worked with him. So thank you, everyone. It has been an incredible experience as far as how much support we have gotten as a family throughout these difficult few months. So thank you. So as I was contemplating as to what to say, it was very difficult for me because there's so much to say, and it's hard to figure out how to narrow this down to the 3 to 5 minutes that Kevin wanted this to be. So Scott loved quotes. Every time before there was a convention or a meeting of some sort, he spent hours just going through different quotes, trying to find just the right one. So did I. I read a lot of quotes, but the one that kind of caught my attention was the following: to do what you want to do, to leave a mark in a way you think is important and lasting. This is life lived well. Lauren Powell Jobs. I felt that this quote was so appropriate for Scott because even though his life was cut short, he has left this world a better place. I cannot possibly tell you how many times he mentioned to me, to our family, to anyone who would listen, how important it was for each of us to leave this world a better place than what we found. And I certainly think that he has accomplished that. I do want to say, though, none of it was done just by himself. Part of what he enjoyed the most was the collaboration, working together, being a part of something big, and he absolutely loved it. His dedication to the National Federation of the Blind had no limits. He loved the organization, he loved the people in it, and it was definitely his family. He enjoyed tremendously being a part of the ABA, American Bar Association. He treasured the friendships that work brought to him, but he also really loved the work that they did, the challenges that they got to face, and the progress that they got to make. Every single thing that Scott did, he really treasured it. So this is his professional life. We have heard from many colleagues, friends, and as many people say, he was a very genuine person. So you didn't have to guess, where Scott stood on any issues or what his mood was like or any of that. And I absolutely love that about Scott. So what I want to talk about is kind of following the quote. To do what you want to do and to leave a mark took a completely different meaning when Scott became a father. He loved being a dad. And he was goofy when the kids were little. He would come up with all kinds of stories with permanent characters in them, and they had funny names. We did have a tent in our living room, and that tent traveled all over the place. I am telling you, whoever made that tent deserves a medal, because with the kids and Scott in it, it rolled all over and it never broke. I mean, it took years for it to disassemble. We had a plastic car that we had a roundabout in our house, and he pushed that car with the kids in it so fast, like it was a race of a lifetime. So he absolutely loved being a dad, and he loved sharing and showing the world to me as well as to the kids. Every time there was an opportunity where there was a meeting in an interesting place, he really asked me to join him. And we would go to these places, and he was always so busy. He was in meetings or, negotiating something, but he'd always make sure he would sit down and say, let's look up tours. I'd love for the kids to learn about history. So we've learned about spaceships and all kinds of other ships and history and architecture, and he wanted to bring all of that to our family, whether that was directly through him or through myself. And then there was another part where I stepped back and I said, absolutely, have at it, because Scott loved water and he loved boats, and he loved boats that went fast. So I had to allow him to enjoy some times with the kids on his own, because while I went to the coffee shop and enjoyed a good cup of coffee. Do what you want to do and leave the mark you want. That was a good motto for Scott in everything that he did. He loved his sports teams. And I will tell you, it was best for anyone not to be in any close proximity when any of the sports teams that he was highly passionate about were playing, because he took things very seriously. Win or lose. Another hobby that Scott had, he loved anything connected with aerospace, whether that was airplanes or space. You will probably be pressed to find someone outside of the professional community who cared that deeply and was as curious about space and airplanes as Scott was. And he wanted to make sure that it was interesting to everyone around him as well. So one of the things that he loved to do, we would go over the cable channels, and I would try to convince him to cut back on channels a little bit. And that was non-negotiable because part of the channels was the NASA channel. So he would turn it on, and for those of you who have never watched a NASA channel, it is not the most action-packed show. Not a whole lot goes on there. So he would turn it on, and it would be in the background, and I would forget about it. Then all of a sudden, as I go around, by doing my business, all of a sudden the astronauts would start communicating in my living room, and got me startled every single time. And then I would just laugh because I knew this was something that was so important to Scott, and he was very passionate about it. Another thing that he absolutely loved, which you've heard many, many times here, he loved music and anything to do with music. And yes, he did explore all kinds of different genres of music. Some of our neighbors are here, and I apologize on behalf of our family, because I know many of them knew when I was not home. What happened then was we had outdoor speakers, of which Scott was very proud. So I would come home and find him on a back porch swing, blasting the music like there's no tomorrow, and singing to it full force. Everything Scott did, he did with all his heart, whether that was work or singing or having fun or anything to do with that. So hang on a second. Let's go back to do what is important to you. One of my most favorite things, and something that I treasure and forever will, is how intellectual, full of curiosity, and open our conversations were. Often, dinner time turned into a debate, inquiry, or just a plain discussion. We all asked questions, doubted, agreed, argued sometimes, but it was so powerful, loving, full of curiosity. I love that about our family. Scott had this incredible sixth sense in him. He just absolutely, I always went to him, probably drove him crazy, because whenever we were about to embark on a new journey, I would go to him and say, "Does this feel right to you?" And he tried so very hard to teach me how to trust myself and how to listen to myself and how to know when something is right. He did try very, very hard. I hate to say that he hasn't succeeded completely. But this brings me to one of the last things I want to say. What he has taught me is how to be a part of a larger community. And especially these last few months, there is absolutely no way our family could have gotten through this time without our communities. So many of them. Our National Federation of the Blind family, our biological family, our friends, our neighbors. I just started a new job. It's incredibly touching how supportive the team is on my job. I want to thank every single person. And while my heart wants to name everyone who has been deeply involved, what I want to say, I know I will accidentally forget someone and then lose sleep over it. So here's what I want to say to every single one of you who called, sent a card, brought dinner, held our hands, just listened. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. I want to conclude what I say. Mark Riccobono, you and I think alike. Actually, this song came up twice already. This is the third time this song is going to come up. Many of you do know that Scott absolutely loved U2. And while I was looking through listening to many songs, trying to figure out which one to play for our wonderful visitors who cannot be here in person and are going to be on Zoom, came up with a list with help from my friend. But I also was trying to listen and find songs that I heard Scott play many times, because this is about Scott. It doesn't matter which one I like, right? So this is about Scott. So I was trying to remember his voice, because when he listened to music, he didn't just listen to music. So one of the songs that kept coming up over and over and over again was the song titled One. Now, Scott and I mentioned how much I appreciated our conversations because they were so deeply intellectual quite often. We talked about ethics, we talked about human rights, we talked about so many different things, and I just absolutely enjoyed that. So part of the reason, even though Scott really enjoyed the music U2 produced, he also deeply appreciated how involved they were in social justice and in human rights. He said that to me numerous times, how important it was to him that not only they sang and they produced good music, but they also cared about people. So the reason I chose just a tiny little quote from this song that is called One, and if you have never listened to it, I really urge you. I have done very extensive research on what is behind this song, and it really truly is quite incredible because it's very open to interpretation. Everybody can, as you listen to it, depending on kind of what you are going through in your life, people interpret it in different ways. So the reason I chose a quote from this song was because it reminded me of the community that we are a part of. So diverse, yet somehow so complete and so right. And what this song says is we are one, but not the same. We get to carry each other. I invite you all to continue the work that Scott started. Diversity, acceptance was very, very important to Scott. So let us embrace diversity. Let us embrace the fact that we don't live in a harmonious world. There are conflicts. How do we look for resolution? Let us move forward and embrace the one but not the same, and the idea that we get to carry each other. Thank you.
We love you, Anahit. Thank you very, very much. And I don't know who picked who, but y'all made a good choice there of each other, I suppose, to carry each other. Still think Achtung Baby was a great record, Scott. I just got to tell you. Okay, well, we're halfway there. So, are the Cherry Creek Maestro Choir, are you guys, Carter, are you guys ready to play for us, sing for us? Oh, ready. So all I have to do is say, you're on and you're ready to go. Yeah? Oh, you're coming. Okay, well, Carter, she's going to, do you want to introduce the group? You want to do that? Here, hold on. Let's do this. You can introduce the group, and I give you Carter Labar and the Maestro Choir of Cherry Creek.
Okay, my name's Carter. I had the honor of being Scott's son. Yeah. This is Meister Singers, only a few of us, but just choir from Creek, and I really appreciate all my friends for coming out and supporting and singing. So, yeah.
The Cherry Creek Meister Singers, everyone. What a beautiful, Scott loved a cappella, by the way. First person to turn me on to Stray Note Chaser at Christmas time, and people had eggnog. He had a Tanqueray tonic, and good time was had by all. Wonderful way to move toward the end. By now, Scott would have told me the score of the Kansas City Chiefs game, but I really wish he had done that. Now, I do think that we will get together here in a little bit and we'll have some toasts and the like. What I'd like us to do now is just have a moment of silent benediction. And we will all be carrying Scott's heart as best we can as we move forward. I know that. We all know that. That's why we're here. If we could take just a moment of silence and reflections and memory. Thank you very much. I want to, one of Scott's favorite things, and he loves state conventions and national conventions like a lot of us in this room do, but Scott had such a passion for the work and the fellowship and the camaraderie and at our conventions. And one of the great things that some of us recall is for years, Mary Ellen Jernigan would tell us what to do to prepare the hall for the banquet. People already know this. Now, she hasn't been doing it the last few years. We have someone else doing it, but for years, we'd have to get Scott's pack table packed away, if you will. And then right at the very end, because the hotel would have to flip the room, like they're going to have to do some flipping now. And there were certain lines that Mrs. Mary Ellen Jernigan, and there we go. Thank you. And she won't say the precise ones, but Lisa Bonderson and I thought, let's end this program kind of the way we started it, with the lovely Mary Ellen Jernigan.
Okay. For those of you who might be expecting to hear me say, stand up, turn around, and head for the door. I got to tell you, it's a little more complicated than that tonight. Now, instead of having tables rolling in behind you, as we speak and as you hear, the hotel is rolling away the wall between this room and the reception room. When the wall is gone, but not before the hotel tells us they are done moving it, you have two options for entering the reception room. Option one will simply be to make a 90-degree turn to your left, and, this will surprise you, at whatever leisurely pace you choose to walk directly into the reception room. Option two will be to exit from the back of this room into the ballroom foyer, turn right, walk a short distance, and enter the reception room, which will be on your right. In the foyer, directly across from those doors, you will find the first of 3 cash bars. While we are waiting for the wall to be removed, let me tell you a little bit about what to expect at the reception. There will be a variety of seating options. The center of the room will have some tall cocktail tables, some shorter cocktail tables with chairs, as well as plenty of room for standing and mingling, and a few chairs along the walls. In the room where we now are, there will be some standard banquet-style tables with chairs, a water, coffee, and tea station on the back wall. In the foyer, immediately outside of this room, are picture boards with photos of Scott. Now, for easier orientation, since we will be entering the reception room from 2 different directions, I've decided to name the walls in the room as follows. The carving station wall, an imaginary wall located where you hear the wall being moved. the opposite the carving station wall, the foyer wall, and the opposite the foyer wall. Now, I tell you these walls because now I'm going to tell you what you're going to find along each of them. Once inside the reception room, you will find food stations attended by hotel servers. First, 2 carving stations, obviously on the imaginary carving station wall. One with herbed roasted pork loin and a second with roast breast of turkey, both on rolls. Along the opposite the foyer wall is a station with vegetable crudité. I had to look up how to say that. Brie in puff pastry with crackers and berries and a spinach tortilla vegan wrap. Then a cash bar, number 2, just beyond on the same wall. On the opposite the carving station wall, you will find the dessert station with brownies and lemon and apple crisp bars. And finally, along the foyer wall, there is cash bar number 3 and a coffee, tea, and water station. Now, Lisa, did I get in all the details you insisted that I have? Okay, now, I think we need to give the hotel maybe just a little more time. Lisa, tell me when. Okay. If you are going to take option 2, I think it is okay for you to do that now, again, at whatever leisurely pace you choose. And we'll wait just a couple of minutes more for option 1, which Lisa will tell me when it Okay, so option 1, people, just hold on a little bit longer. No. Option number 2, people, just go right ahead. Option number 1, people, wait a little bit. Lisa says, go on, everybody.
Hey!